The night the wicked mother-in-law screamed for help was the same night the village realized the monster had finally met her match. Firelight danced across her face as she accused her daughter-in-law of a crime so terrible that gasps filled the yard. Her voice was loud, shaking, and convincing. People rushed in half-dressed, holding lamps, whispering her name with respect and fear. The young wife stood in the middle of the compound, silent, eyes steady, heart pounding like a drum before war. No one noticed how calm she was. No one noticed how the old woman's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. The accusation was meant to destroy her, to chase her away forever. But deep inside, the young woman felt something rise that she had never felt before. Not fear, not anger, certainty. Tonight, she would stop running. Tonight, the wicked woman who ruled through lies would face a truth she could not escape. The mother-in-law had ruled that house for years like a silent storm. She did not need sticks or fists. Her weapon was humiliation, served with a smile. She controlled food, stories, and emotions. She decided who was good and who was cursed. To outsiders, she was a hard-working widow who sacrificed everything for her son. To the young wife, she was darkness that never slept. Every mistake was exaggerated. Every success was ignored. She whispered poison into her son's ears while pretending to pray for peace. The house felt heavy, as if walls remembered cruelty. The young woman learned to speak little, to walk softly, to disappear in sight plain. Many nights she cried alone, wondering if leaving would be better than dying slowly inside. But something inside her refused to break. It watched, it waited. And now, with the entire village watching, the wicked woman had pushed her too far. The accusation was theft. Money meant for a community project had gone missing, and the mother-in-law swore she saw the young woman take it. Her voice cracked perfectly, like a trained actor. She called ancestors, swore on graves, and begged the elders to act quickly before more damage was done. The son stood frozen, shame burning his face. The young woman felt the weight of every eye on her skin. One wrong word could ruin her forever. Silence stretched, thick and painful. Then she spoke, calmly, clearly, without tears. She said she accepted judgment, but only after 7 days. 7 days for truth to breathe, 7 days for actions to speak. If she was guilty, she would leave with nothing. If the accusation was false, the same rule would apply to the accuser. Murmurs exploded. The mother-in-law laughed loudly, agreeing instantly. She believed time belonged to her. She did not know time had already chosen sides. From the first day, the old woman began her traps. She hid tools and blamed carelessness. She spoiled food and accused the young woman of witchcraft. She whispered to neighbors and smiled when suspicion grew. But the young woman stayed steady. She cleaned patiently. She explained calmly. She greeted everyone with respect. Something strange began to happen. People started noticing details they had ignored for years. The old woman's stories changed slightly each time. Her anger came too fast. Her fear slipped through her voice. By the third day, the house felt tense. The mother-in-law could feel control slipping through her fingers. She pretended to fall and cried that she was pushed. The crowd rushed in, then froze. 2 children said they saw everything. No one touched her. The old woman laughed nervously, but her eyes burned with panic. That night, she could not sleep. The young woman slept peacefully. By the 4th day, the son finally began to see clearly. He noticed how his wife stood taller, how his mother avoided people's eyes. He asked questions that had never crossed his mind before. The old woman panicked. That night, she pulled him aside and cried, claiming her daughter-in-law planned to ruin him. She begged him to choose. When he asked for proof, she promised it by morning. Before sunrise, she searched the young woman's room, planting stolen items, rehearsing her tears. But dawn arrived with witnesses. When she presented the proof, The young woman calmly pointed out something small but deadly. The items were wrapped in the old woman's old cloth, stitched years ago. Silence fell like a curse. The ground beneath the wicked woman began to crack. The young woman invited the elders to search her room. Nothing. She then invited them to search the old woman's room. Gasps filled the house. More hidden items were found, lies waiting to be used. The old woman screamed, accusing spirits, fate, jealousy, but no one moved. Her voice had lost her power. People began remembering other moments, other lies. The seventh day was approaching like judgment. The old woman's fear turned into rage. She threatened curses. She called herself protected. She said no one could touch her. But power built on lies always shake when truth stands firm. On the seventh day, the entire village gathered. No laughter, no drums. The old woman demanded a public curse ritual, claiming the spirits would expose the guilty. The air grew heavy. Some people stepped back. The young woman agreed, but added one condition. The curse must return to the sender if built on lies. The old woman hesitated. That pause told the truth louder than words. Still, pride pushed her forward. She began chanting. Halfway, her voice failed. Wind rose suddenly, knocking things over. The old woman fell to her knees, choking on fear. Silence swallowed the yard. The young woman stepped forward and spoke calmly. She said lies cannot stand forever. She said truth always comes home. The old woman broke. She confessed everything. Years of cruelty spilled out. Manipulation, false tears, destroyed peace. The sun collapsed in shame. The villagers listened in shock. When the confession ended, the air felt clean again. Judgment was clear. The agreement would be honored. The young woman could have chosen revenge. She didn't. She said the old woman must leave the house, not in anger, but in truth. Forgiveness did not mean closeness. Healing needed distance. The decision was final. The old woman left stripped of power, watched by the same people she once controlled. The house breathed again. After the old woman left the compound, silence sat heavily on the ground like dust after a storm. People did not celebrate. They did not clap. They only nodded slowly, as if something ancient had been settled. The young woman felt her knees weaken, not from fear, but from release. Years of swallowed pain finally had somewhere to go. Her husband stood beside her,
unable to speak, realizing how blind he had been. That night, the house felt strange and quiet. No sharp words, no watching eyes. The young woman lay awake, listening to the sound of her own breathing, wondering if peace could truly last. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. For the first time since she entered that marriage, she did not feel like a guest in her own life. Still, deep inside, she knew the story was not finished yet. The shadow of the wicked woman was gone, but the echo of her actions still lived in many hearts. Days passed, and the village slowly returned to routine. But something had changed. People began to speak more honestly. Wives stopped lowering their voices. Husbands listened more carefully. Mothers-in-law were watched more closely. The young woman became a quiet example of strength. She did not boast. She did not remind anyone of what she endured. Yet her presence carried weight. Her husband changed deeply. He apologized in ways words could not fully cover. He defended her openly, even when it was uncomfortable. Trust rebuilt slowly, like a broken pot carefully joined together. Meanwhile, news of the old woman spread. Alone, she struggled. Without people to control, her bitterness turned inward. She replayed her past cruelty every night. For the first time, she understood fear from the other side. The match she met had not beaten her with evil. It had defeated her with truth. One evening, a message arrived. The old woman wanted to see her daughter-in-law. The request carried no command, no threat, only need. The young woman did not rush to answer. She thought carefully. Finally, she agreed, but not privately. They met under a large tree where people passed nearby. The old woman looked smaller, older, stripped of pride. Her voice shook as she spoke. She admitted her jealousy, her need for control, her fear of losing her son. She apologized without excuses. The young woman listened quietly, her face calm but her heart heavy. When the old woman finished, the young woman spoke softly. She said forgiveness does not erase pain, but it frees the future. She wished the old woman peace, then stood and walked away. The old woman watched her go, realizing the true punishment was not exile, but understanding what she had destroyed. As months turned into years, the story became part of village memory. Elders told it to young brides as warning and hope. They said evil often hides behind respect and age. They said silence can be dangerous when used to protect cruelty. The young woman grew into her strength fully. She became someone people trusted during conflict. Her words carried calm, not fear. Her home filled with laughter, real laughter, not forced smiles. The old woman lived quietly until her last days, no longer feared, no longer powerful. Some said she changed, others said regret followed her until the end. But all agreed on one thing: her fall taught more than her rule ever did. The balance of the village shifted because one woman chose truth over submission. Sometimes at night, the young woman remembered the first scream, the fallen lamp, the accusation meant to destroy her. She remembered how close she came to breaking. She also remembered the moment she decided to stand still instead of run. That choice shaped everything. Pain did not vanish from her memory, but it no longer controlled her. She understood that strength was not loud, it was patient, it waited for the right moment. The house that once felt like a prison now felt warm and alive. Children played freely in the yard. Stories were told without fear. Peace, she learned, was not given, it was claimed. The villagers often spoke of that seventh day as if it were sacred. They said truth had walked openly among them. They said lies could not survive when watched closely. The young woman never corrected them. She knew truth did not need decoration, it only needed space. Her marriage healed slowly but deeply. Respect replaced suspicion, partnership replaced silence. Together they built a life no longer ruled by fear of another's approval. The wicked mother-in-law became a lesson rather than a threat, her name spoken carefully, not with hate, but understanding. In time, new brides entered the village, nervous and hopeful. The young woman welcomed them warmly. She watched carefully for signs of quiet cruelty. When she saw it, she spoke early, calmly, firmly. No monster grew unchecked again. The cycle broke not through violence, but awareness. That was the real victory. The old woman's end came quietly. No drama, no curse, just silence. When news reached the village, people paused and nodded. Some felt sadness, some felt relief. The young woman closed her eyes and whispered a short prayer, not for forgiveness, but for release. The story was complete. Long after, children still asked why the wicked mother-in-law lost. Elders answered simply. They said truth never rushes, but it never forgets the road home. And so the story ends where it should, not with revenge, but with balance. The wicked and evil mother-in-law met her match not in someone crueler, but in someone unbreakable. A woman who stood still while lies collapsed around her. A woman who proved that even the darkest authority cannot survive when truth finally decides to speak.